AITA for not attending my sister's wedding after she disinvited my partner. Background: my name is Jenna, and I am a 30-year-old graphic designer living in Seattle. I have an older sister, Emily, who is 33 and about to get married to her fiancé, Mark, in a few months. We've always had a complicated relationship, often characterized by Emily's tendency to be controlling and judgmental. However, I always hoped that as adults, we would grow to understand one another better. I've been in a loving relationship with my partner, Sarah, for the past 3 years. Sarah is a kind, creative, and supportive person, and her presence in my life has been the best thing ever. My family, however, has always had mixed feelings about her. My parents have never outright said they disapprove, but I can feel the tension in the air whenever Sarah is around. They were raised in a conservative environment and struggle with accepting anything outside their traditional norms. The incident. The wedding planning process started about 6 months ago when Emily got engaged. She was ecstatic and wanted everything to be perfect, which I completely understood. Emily has always been a perfectionist. For her, the wedding was not just a celebration of love, but also a display of how successful she is at organizing events. Thus, in her typical fashion, she started planning every detail months in advance, and that included creating a guest list that she believed would reflect well on her and Mark. Initially, when Emily announced her engagement, she invited Sarah to the wedding. I was relieved to see that my sister was at least open-minded enough to include her in such a significant family event. However, that relief was short-lived. Just a few weeks later, Emily called me one evening sounding frantic. She explained that our mother had expressed her discomfort with Sarah's presence at the wedding. Mom didn't say Sarah was unwelcome, but she insinuated that having her there could lead to disruptions during the ceremony. Emily argued that she didn't want to create an uncomfortable atmosphere, especially since our extended family would be there, along with many family friends from a conservative background. I could feel my heart dropping. I tried to understand Emily's perspective. She was worried about the family's reputation. However, at the same time, I didn't believe it was fair to disinvite Sarah just because of our mother's backward views. In fact, I had seen how supportive Sarah had always been during family gatherings, even amid awkwardness. A week later, I received a text from Emily, stating that she had made the difficult decision to disinvite Sarah from the wedding. Instead of confronting her directly, I burst into tears upon reading that message. I wanted to respond angrily, but I also felt helpless. Ultimately, I texted Emily back asking her how she could do that to me. I felt betrayed and outraged. We had a heated exchange where I tried to express how hurtful her decision was. To my dismay, Emily was unapologetic. She justified her decision by saying that she wanted her special day to be as stress-free as possible and that she didn't want the added pressure of having to deal with tensions arising from Sarah's presence. The fallout. As the wedding date drew closer, I felt a mix of anger and sadness. I couldn't believe my sister was prioritizing some warped sense of family harmony over my relationship. Sarah, being understanding as always, told me that she was fine either way, but I knew she was hurt. We had talked about how nice it would be to enjoy family celebrations together and how happy it would make us both. After a couple of days of contemplation, I decided to take a stand. Instead of attending the wedding without Sarah, I would rather not go at all. I sent Emily a message letting her know that I couldn't possibly celebrate a day that excluded someone so important to me. I told her I loved her, but also hoped she could understand my position. I never received a response. As the wedding day approached, I felt at peace with my decision. I chose to spend that day with Sarah instead, basking in the love we shared away from the family drama. We planned a picnic in the park, reminiscent of our early days together. Just as we settled down with a basket full of homemade sandwiches and cookies, my phone buzzed. It was a message from our mother asking why I hadn't made it to Emily's wedding. The conflicts emerge. I told Sarah about Mom's message, and she encouraged me to reply honestly. I texted back that I couldn't support a family event that excluded Sarah. To my surprise, my mother called me the following day, and our conversation quickly escalated into an argument. Mom emphasized how I was ruining the family's reputation and had sabotaged Emily's big day. I felt accused of being selfish. She threw around derogatory terms of immature and destructive, pointing out that I had turned my back on my family. After the call ended, I felt an oppressive weight settle over my chest. The love I had for my family was still there, but it had morphed into sadness and frustration. It was disappointing to see how easily they could discount my happiness for the sake of their conventional views. Emily eventually reached out a few days after the wedding, expressing her disappointment. She wrote that my absence was a letdown for her special day. I didn't respond immediately, as I felt the wound from her earlier decision was still too raw. Days turned into weeks, and neither of us budged. Things got tense within our family, especially when I learned that Emily had told some relatives my side of the story, painting it as though I was the villain for not supporting her. The climax. A family gathering a few weeks later, I faced the music. Extended family was uncomfortable, and I could feel the tension as I walked into the room. It felt like I was entering a courtroom, each pair of eyes piercing through me, carrying unspoken judgments. I endured uncomfortable conversations laden with passive-aggressive comments about supporting family and picking sides. The worst came from our uncle, who cornered me and angrily said, "You're an adult. The world is not just about you and your partner. You need to grow up and stop being selfish." I was heartbroken. I stood there shaken and isolated until my mother finally pulled me aside. In private, she expressed how ashamed she was of my actions. Her words made it clear that my absence had deeply affected her. Rather than defending myself or bringing up how Emily treated my relationship, I found myself in tears, pleading for their understanding. I had always been the dutiful daughter, supporting every family function and event. Yet in this moment, the family that I had always accommodated didn't lift a finger to see things from my perspective. The resolution. After weeks of simmering tensions, it finally struck me that the path ahead required a hard reset for the family dynamics. I sought professional support to help navigate the feelings swirling around in my head. I joined a support group for LGBTQ+ individuals with family estrangement issues and found a compassionate community that understood my struggles. Through therapy, I realized my self-worth didn't depend on my family's approval. I wrote a letter, pouring out my feelings about how Emily's choice hurt not just me and Sarah, but could also damage our relationships long-term. I communicated my deep love for Emily, but also emphasized how her decision demonstrated a lack of respect for me as her sister. The letter also included my hope for future reconciliation without conditions. I mailed it, intending only for it to be a step toward healing, not expecting a direct response. Months later, my phone buzzed again. This time, it was a message from Emily, thanking me for the letter and expressing her regret over how things had turned out. She acknowledged that the wedding planning had overwhelmed her and that she had made a hasty decision without fully considering the consequences. She asked if I'd be willing to meet and talk things over. We met at a cafe soon, after both apprehensive but hopeful. We shared our perspectives and opened our hearts, acknowledging the hurt on both sides. Emily admitted that she was struggling to please everyone to the detriment of our relationship. We cried, laughed, and eventually made a pact to communicate better moving forward. As we wrapped up our meeting, we both felt lighter. While the family dynamics might still require work, both Emily and I knew that love and understanding could heal the distance that had grown. Conclusion. Now, a year later, things have improved significantly. Emily and I often check in with one another, and she has made an effort to understand and accept my life choices. My partner Sarah is a welcomed member of the family, and we work hard to continue mending relationships. The journey wasn't easy, but AITA. I still don't think I was wrong for standing by my partner. I believe I fought for the love I deserved, just as much as the love Emily sought. Ultimately, standing firm taught not only my family but also myself the significance of boundaries, respect, and the power of open dialogue in any relationship, especially one with family. In the end, we can't change our family's beliefs or values overnight, Still, we can choose how we respond and stand up for those we love, and through that, sometimes the most beautiful transformations can begin. AITA for refusing to attend my sister's wedding. After she disinvited my partner, I've always believed that family comes first. Growing up in a close-knit household, my siblings and I were taught to stand by each other like pillars of support, no matter what life threw at us. However, my perspective was recently put to the test when my sister Jenna announced her engagement to her long-term boyfriend, who I'll refer to as Greg. At first, I was overjoyed for her. After all, they had been together for over 5 years, and Greg had become like a brother to me. But as the wedding date approached, the cracks began to show in our family's seemingly perfect foundation. I, 29F, had been in a long-term, committed relationship with my partner, Riley, 28F, for the past 3 years. Riley and I met in college. We'd built a life together, sharing everything from mundane daily routines to our dreams for the future. We've always been open about our relationship with both friends and family. To us, love is love, and we've fought against any prejudices that have come our way. After Jenna announced her engagement, our family, especially Mom and Dad, started getting involved in the wedding planning. Jenna had always dreamt of a big wedding, so this was no surprise to any of us. What was surprising, however, was the sudden shift in her attitude toward Riley. It started with Jenna asking me about the guest list. She wanted to keep it exclusive, mostly to family and close friends. I understood her perspective. We did have a large family, and keeping things intimate would be cost-effective. So I assured her Riley wouldn't be a problem, as she was family in my eyes, and had been a significant part of our family gatherings since we started dating. But as the months passed, and Jenna became increasingly fixated on her fairy tale wedding, I sensed a palpable change in her demeanor. She began drifting away from me, leaving me out of wedding planning discussions. Whenever I brought up Riley's role in the wedding, she would quickly change the subject. One day, while we were sitting on the porch, I casually mentioned how excited I was to have Riley be there, and that's when it happened. Jenna's face went cold. About that," she stammered, looking down at her hands. "What do you mean?" I asked. That's when she told me that in her perfect vision of the wedding, she couldn't include a non-traditional couple or a +1 for a same-sex relationship. I felt my heart sink into my stomach. I asked her if she was serious, to which she confirmed that she was disinviting Riley. "But, Jenna, you literally said that she is family," I argued, trying to fight back against the rising tide of indignation. "We've been together for 3 years. It feels incredible, disrespectful, to think that you can't even bear the thought of her being there on one of the most important days of your life." She stood her ground, insisting that her wedding should reflect her ideal aesthetic. And it was then that I truly understood. This wasn't just about the guest list. This was about something far deeper, a moral stance against anything that didn't fit her narrow view of what a wedding should be. In disbelief, I left that day feeling crushed. I confided in our parents, who favored Jenna's decision, asserting that weddings are personal and she's entitled to invite whoever she wants. My heart ached even more. Were they all so quick to abandon the values we'd been taught about love and acceptance just because things had gotten too complicated? Weeks rolled by and the wedding neared. Each passing day felt like a gaping wound that refused to heal. I overheard family conversations filled with excitement about flower arrangements and the cake. Everything, except for discussing the reason behind Riley's absence. And one evening, a week before the wedding, I made the spontaneous decision to see if Jenna would reconsider. I called her and begged her to think about including Riley. I assured her that it wouldn't affect her wedding's aesthetic. My plea was met with a flat no. That night I couldn't sleep. Thoughts raced through my mind, twisting into a knot of anger and pain. I had never felt so abandoned by family, especially by Jenna, who I had considered not just a sister, but my confidant and friend. The day of the wedding approached, and with each passing hour I felt more torn about attending. I knew that if I went, I would have to face the reality that my partner was being kept away from the celebration of love because of an outdated belief. I also felt that showing up meant I was accepting her choices, a betrayal of my own values. Eventually, I reached out to Riley seeking her advice. Surprisingly, she was understanding. "You should do what feels right for you," she said softly. I shared with her all of my confusions, pain and anger regarding Jenna's decision, but Riley reminded me that though it hurt, I shouldn't compromise my own beliefs for anyone's agenda. Now, the wedding day arrived. I was sitting alone in my living room, dressed and ready. As I looked at myself in the mirror, I prayed that my indecision would reveal itself, that somehow the turmoil inside my chest would ease and I would feel driven to attend. But as the minutes turned into hours, I ultimately made the choice. I would not attend. The wedding day unfolded for everyone else. I knew that Jenna would be walking down that aisle glowing with joy. Still, I felt proud. It was a bittersweet victory for me, standing strong in my belief that love shouldn't have a price or a condition attached to it. The next few weeks were challenging. I received messages and calls from family members asking why I didn't attend. Some criticized me for not being supportive, while others resorted to guilt trips. The worst was yet to come, Jenna's wrath. When I finally gathered the courage to face her, things erupted. "How could you do this to me? This is my wedding," she shouted when I confronted her at our parents' house. Jenna seemed astonished at my lack of remorse. "You could have just come and supported me. It was just one day." "Just one day," I replied, firing back. "This is about all the days that come after it. If you think it's acceptable to exclude someone I love, then I don't want to be part of your plans. I just can't support discrimination, especially from family." We didn't speak for weeks following that outburst. The tension between us was thicker than the air in a hot sauna. I felt isolated from my family, and suddenly I became an outcast. Not just a daughter or sister, but a non-family member due to my choices and values. I was heartbroken. Days turned into weeks, and I began re-evaluating my place in the family. I spent more time with friends who shared my views, offering me comfort and understanding. But what made it worse was scrolling through social media, filled with photos from the wedding, Jenna and Greg looking blissfully happy, surrounded by family and friends, while I was nowhere to be found. Then Christmas approached. Our family always gathered for Christmas dinner, and I dreaded the thought of facing Jenna and the rest of the family. On one hand, I wanted to go to show support for my parents. On the other hand, I dreaded the inevitable awkwardness and judgment that awaited me. Ultimately, I decided not to join the festivities after consulting with Riley, who supported my choice. She reminded me that I had to prioritize my mental health above everything else. The holidays came and went, and my absence only widened the rift in our family. Months passed, and just when I thought things couldn't get any worse, our family was hit with a tragedy. Our grandmother was hospitalized and later passed away. After everything, it felt like an unspeakable blow had struck our family's core. In this moment of grief, I felt that the family dynamic would begin to shift. It often does in tragedy, doesn't it? I attended the funeral, the air heavy with loss. However, the unspoken tension cracked the atmosphere. I noticed Jonas and my parents whispering in hushed tones, casting sideways glances at me. The funeral ended, and I found myself standing with Riley on the periphery, feeling a mixture of sadness and frustration. Finally, Jenna approached us, her expression shifting to a rare hint of vulnerability. "I'm really sorry about Grandma." The words tumbled from her lips, heavy with regret. "Thank you," I replied, my heart oscillating between forgiving her and feeling the years of hurt resurface. "I've realized a lot in the last few months," she said, looking down at the ground. "I shouldn't have made such a big deal about your relationship. I was caught up in my wedding, wanting everything to be perfect." "What you call perfect excludes people that matter, Jenna. Love isn't about aesthetics," I replied, feeling an enormous weight of emotion flood back. I know. You were right to stand your ground. I think you may have been the first one to—" She trailed off for a moment. "I don't want to hold on to differences anymore." In that fleeting moment, a foundation cracked open. I realized that while there had been pain and heartache, maybe there was hope. We stood there, two sisters scarred and broken, yet still connected by shared memories of laughter and love. Complicated as it was, so was love. It was messy yet beautiful, a lesson I learned long ago and drowned beneath the weight of weddings and bonnets. Standing there together with Jenna, I thought perhaps we could rebuild. The journey ahead was still uncertain, but I took a tentative step forward. "Can we try to make this work?" I asked. "Yes," she replied softly, and with that simple word, I knew we were inching closer to healing. In time, we'd find a way to redefine family, a family where love blossomed, unbothered by expectations. Final thoughts. Navigating familial expectations can be complex, and sometimes standing alone means finding your own peace. I still ponder whether I did the right thing by missing Jenna's wedding, yet that time apart ultimately brought clarity to our relationship. Though it might take time, love, and patience, perhaps we could rebuild a bridge stronger than before, a bridge built on respect, understanding, and acceptance. AITA. AITA for telling my sister's daughter the truth about her biological father. Background: I, 34F, come from a large family. My parents had 4 children, and I am the eldest. My siblings include Sarah, 30F, Mike, 28M, and Jess, 24F. Growing up, we had a close bond, or so I thought. Over the years, however, our relationships have become complicated, especially after Jess's surprise pregnancy at the age of 18. When Jess was pregnant, she was scared and unprepared for motherhood. The father of her child, Dylan, was a high school friend who didn't want to be involved when he found out about the pregnancy. I helped Jess prepare for every step, from baby showers to late-night diaper changes. I thought we'd emerge from this experience stronger as sisters, but things took a turn when Jess gave birth. She named her daughter Lily, and while Jess struggled with the challenges of being a single mother, I was her support system. That was until I learned a secret. One, that would change everything. Consider this. Jess had been keeping Lily's biological father's identity a secret, even from our family. It turns out that Dylan was not the only man in Jess's life back then. When Jess was approximately 5 months pregnant, she had a brief relationship with a man named Nate, who is the actual biological father of Lily. This was something Jess only revealed to me in a moment of vulnerability when Lily was 2 years old. Conflict arises. After Jess's confession, I was torn. I understood the need for Jess to protect her daughter from unnecessary drama, but I also felt that one day, Lily would deserve the truth. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that Jess's decision to keep it a secret could lead to a problematic situation down the road. However, Jess insisted I stay quiet and promised that everything would work out in the end. Fast forward to a few years later, Lily was now 6 and had started asking questions about her father. Jess, in an emotional panic, told Lily that her father was Dylan and that he loved her from afar but couldn't be a part of her life. I watched as Jess struggled to maintain this facade, and I began to worry about the long-term implications. The catalyst. One fateful day, during a family gathering, I overheard Lily talking to my niece about daddies and how Dylan was her father. It broke my heart hearing this, and it made me question Jess's choices once more. That evening, while putting together an arts and crafts project with Lily, I decided to broach the topic delicately. "You know, sweetheart, sometimes families can be complicated," I began. "Not all daddies are the same, right?" Lily stared, clearly confused, and said, "But I have a daddy. His name is Dylan." I hesitated. I thought of Jess's warning and how much I wanted to protect her feelings, but something in me felt it was time for the truth. "Well, Lily, what if I told you that there might have been another person who could be your daddy too?" Lily's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" In that moment, I did what I thought was right. I mentioned Nate's name. I didn't tell her much, just that sometimes families can have different types of daddies for different reasons. I felt that, at least, she had a right to know there was someone out there who might love her. The fallout. What happened next was a whirlwind. Jess overheard our conversation and immediately went on the offensive. "Did you tell her? Did you say something?" she accused, furious and hurt. I tried to explain my reasoning, how I wanted to give Lily a sense of her foundation without overwhelming her. But Jess wouldn't hear it. "Do you know what you've done? How could you betray me and put that on her?" Jess yelled. Tension escalated quickly. I tried to defend my actions, explaining the confusion that would arise if Lily grew older without knowing the complete truth. Jess shouted that I had ruined her daughter's childhood, that I had no regard for her parenting, and that I had betrayed the trust she placed in me. The aftermath of that confrontation was brutal. Jess cut me out of her life entirely for several weeks, only speaking to me in messages that were cold and hostile. I attempted to reach out, offering to talk things over, but Jess remained unyielding. Turning point. It was during this period of silence that I received a message from our mother. She expressed concern over the family's divide and requested that we all gather to discuss what happened. I reluctantly agreed, anxious yet ready to face whatever fallout was waiting for me. At the gathering, Jess was defensive and visibly upset. Our parents tried to mediate, but Jess launched into a monologue about my betrayal. She accused me of being thoughtless and selfish for bringing up Nate. I countered her claims by explaining that it was my responsibility as an aunt to protect Lily and provide her with knowledge about her identity. The argument became heated, and eventually Jess fled the room, leaving me feeling like the villain. The tension lingered for weeks, until one day I received a call from Jess. "Can we talk?" she asked softly. I agreed, hoping she was ready to work through our issues, unpacking emotions. When we met, Jess looked tired and emotionally drained. "I've been thinking a lot about what happened," she began, her voice wavering. We spent hours discussing everything, addressing our feelings, the burden of secrets, and the role of honesty in family. I told her that I regretted how it unfolded, but stood by my belief that Lily deserved clarity about her roots. Eventually, Jess revealed that she had spoken to Lily afterward. "I told her everything," she said, tears streaming down her face. "I told her who Nate is and that he is her biological father. I thought I was protecting her, but now I realize I might have just postponed something she needed to know." The conversation shifted to forgiveness and acceptance. While Jess struggled with the anger and fear she felt when I first told her about Nate, she ultimately acknowledged that keeping secrets would only lead to more heartache in the future. "But why didn't you just come straight to me first?" she asked, more curious than accusatory now. "I was scared," I admitted. "I thought you might hate me for even mentioning Nate. I just wanted to protect you and Lily." Moving forward. In the weeks that followed, things began to improve. Jess started to understand that my intentions weren't malicious and that we were both navigating unfamiliar territory, motherhood, sisterhood, and all the gray areas in between. As we began to rebuild our relationship, Jess decided to have an open conversation with Lily. They talked about Nate, and it turned out that Lily had an innate curiosity about family. The truth seemed to resonate with her, and while there were tears, there was also a sense of relief in finally understanding her history. Our family dynamics began to shift, slowly but surely. Sarah and Mike noticed the changes and sought to mend their relationships with Jess, too. We often gathered, including Lily, in our activities, helping her feel secure in her family despite the complexities involved. Final thoughts. Looking back, I now realize that my desire to intervene stemmed from my love for my sister and my niece. I wanted to ensure that Lily would grow up knowing her truth and feeling accepted. While I still feel guilty for my role in stirring the pot initially, during those family gatherings, I could see that telling the truth, no matter how hard it was to face, ultimately led us closer together. But this experience has taught me a lesson about family bonds, that sometimes love means willingly stepping into uncomfortable territory, navigating misunderstandings, and facing the truths that may very well change everything. Conclusion: AITA. So, AITA for telling my sister's daughter the truth about her biological father, even though it broke the initial trust between Jess and me. I never liked family gatherings, especially the ones that revolved around my father's side. They were diluted events of forced cheerfulness, masked under layers of sincere small talk. Every time I walked into Aunt Lisa's expansive kitchen, where soothing aromas intertwined with harsh laughter, I felt a bit more invisible than I already did. Family meant a mosaic of mismatched personalities, but those related by blood could carve deep wounds quicker than any stranger. Last summer's reunion was particularly tough for me. The family had gathered to celebrate my grandfather's 87th birthday, an event that felt more like a countdown to his final breath rather than a jubilant occasion. It was supposed to be an intimate affair, but I lost count of the cousins and their guffaws, echoing the theme of misplaced loyalty to trivialities and reputation. And of course, there was always the ever-final discussion on the family heirlooms. They're for sharing, Aunt Lisa insisted, wielding the heavy silver candlesticks like a judge wielding the gavel. These pieces belong to all of us. At 28, I was often regarded as the black sheep. My life choices stood in stark contrast to those of my cousins, who had doted on promotions, little kids, and Instagram-worthy milestones. My gift was an eye for photography and a mistrust of tradition, much to Aunt Lisa's chagrin. But I couldn't help myself. As each hour rolled on, my indifference to the heirlooms grew. To make matters worse, I overheard a conversation that crystallized my feelings toward these family gatherings. When Uncle Joe, wineglass glimmering, boldly stated how family heirlooms were like automated markers of success, I felt a knot tighten deep within me. "If you have heirlooms," he said, "isn't that a sign of wisdom and longevity? Our family, we've earned these things." I had been stuck in a job that barely afforded me by. My photography career remained a distant dream, suffocated by safety nets and invisible chains. I wasn't about to rummage through piles of inherited family burdens merely to appease my uncles and aunts. And then it happened. As I faced an entire household of expecting eyes, Aunt Lisa began passing around heirloom vases, each one shining brightly in a show of grandeur. It was irresistible. There was a narrative behind every piece, a web of familial ties coupled with the jealousy that came with ownership. The battle lines were clear. You belonged or you didn't. "Geez, where's my share?" I blurted out, my tongue getting ahead of me as the eerie laughter of my cousins rippled through the room. "Every piece has a story," Aunt Lisa responded with practiced patience, puffing up with self-importance. "You should understand that. These are tokens of family." I leaned back, straining against her words. "Are they family, or are they just possessions?" The room stilled. I could see my cousins exchanging glances, their eyes shimmering with amusement and confusion. Before Aunt Lisa could respond, I made a quick exit. My heart raced as I stepped into the night, grateful for the door on my way out. I threw myself into my small beat-up car. The scent of old leather mingling with memories clung to me, and I unleashed a flood of emotions that had long simmered under a surface of indifference. I drove through the vacant streets, adrenaline coursing through my veins, thinking about what had just transpired. I was angry, not just at my family, but at myself for allowing them to define lineage in ways I didn't believe in. Pieces of gossip didn't make a family, love and understanding did. And at least from my vantage point, those virtues had grown frayed at the edges, fraying our connections thin. The weeks that followed culminated in more than outdated grudges. They made me wonder if I could begin unraveling the intricate knots that tied me to my family. The family meeting was impromptu, a quick gathering at Aunt Lisa's after my grandfather's passing. I knew I needed to confront the idea of heirlooms, traditions, and the emotional currency tied to them. "So what's going to happen to the silver?" I inquired, sitting amongst them like a thorn in a bush. "We're going to decide who gets what," Aunt Lisa said, blinking rapidly. "You mean we're going to fight about what each of us feels we deserve?" I countered, my heart hammering in my chest. "It's not about deserving," Uncle Joe interjected. "It's about legacy." Legacy. I was grappling with the words. All these pieces represent our fractures in our family. They're reminders of who clung to what. "Isn't it time we stop making things difficult?" Gasps cut across the room, and I knew I had crossed a line, but it felt right. Cathartic, even. The dialogue shifted then. Aunt Lisa scowled. My cousins squirmed, and the air heavy with tension made it hard to breathe. The minutes passed. Aunt Lisa began to speak, but her voice faltered. I wasn't ready for that moment to be mine. I had always been ready for a fight, but never for quiet acceptance. "You're right," she finally admitted. "Maybe it's time to see these heirlooms, not as possessions but as memories. Some of us have tried to stake their claim, but we're family first. My body relaxed for a moment. The distance engendered by the predicaments of blood had been severed through the act of admitting vulnerability. "So, what do we do?" I asked, feeling out of my depth now. "Maybe we can take turns sharing stories about each piece," suggested one of my cousins. Each time someone holds it, they get to take a bit of that memory with them. And just like that, my family began reconstructing chains that could bind them differently, not through the ostentatious nature of heirlooms, but through stories, the connections often overlooked in the shadow of competition. As we passed around those dusty treasures, I subtly realized that it wasn't about splintering bonds over possessions. It was about cultivating meaning where there was previously disdain. One after another, we shared anecdotes, revealing tastes and vulnerabilities. I found a renewed sense of connection. A week later, the real surprise came. I headed back home to gather some things for an exhibit of my photography at a local gallery. Exhausted from the emotional drain of the last week, I thought the night alone would allow me to refocus. And then it began. The rush of familial warmth came through the door. "Hey, open up!" my cousin Mia exclaimed as she pushed through my apartment door. What followed was laughter, the aroma of homemade curry mingling with the scent of brewing coffee. It felt oddly grounding, like recollections of yesteryears rushing forward. As they sat around discussing everything while grabbing ill-prepared snacks, I pulled out a dusty box I'd long kept hidden. "What's that?" Uncle Joe asked, his curiosity barely contained. "Things I've inherited and forgotten," I said with a sigh, rolling my shoulders. They gathered closer, and I let them sift through the piece of my past whilst revealing who I was. The gears of family, not through possessions, but stories entwined together, leading to shared laughter. But what are we without these legacy? "Markers?" Aunt Lisa asked playfully. I smiled, taking a moment to ponder who I was in a world that clung desperately to antiquated beliefs. I rose and reached for my grandmother's old camera, a relic of my past, something I held on to with reverence. "Here's to the heirloom of our story," I proclaimed, passing it around, "the one nobody claimed." Together we forged new ties, reinforcing the idea that family, when dissected to its core, wasn't about silver, gold, or an arbitrary legacy. It was about those stories, about the laughter we shared, the moments we cherished, and the delicate threads that bound us stronger than any heirloom. As I closed the door behind them later that night, I realized this was a night worth remembering, a new heirloom forged not from materials, but from love and acceptance. For once it felt like we were on the right path, one where laughter reigned and the finger points fading into unison. In the end, I was no longer just a black sheep. I was a voice, a story, a bond. Hey Reddit, so I, 28F, find myself in a pretty complicated situation, and I really need some outside perspectives. AITA for deciding not to attend my sister's 30F wedding because of her fiancé, 32 Emmy. To give you some backstory, my sister and I've always been fairly close. Growing up, we shared everything from a bedroom to secrets, and I was genuinely excited when she first started dating Lucas. He seemed like a great guy, a little awkward but sweet and earnest. Over time, though, I started to see sides of him that made me uneasy. It started with the comments, little jabs that seemed harmless at first but quickly escalated into something that felt far more malicious. Whenever the family got together or went out to eat, Lucas would frequently poke fun at my sister's weight and appearance. "You sure you want that second slice of cake?" Or "That shirt really doesn't do you any favors," were some of the lighter comments. My sister would laugh it off, but I could see the hurt in her eyes. It made me cringe. I tried to talk to her about it. I even mentioned how it made me uncomfortable, but she insisted I was reading too much into it. "He just jokes around," she said, shrugging off my concern. It seemed like I was the only one who noticed. My parents thought he was hilarious. As their relationship progressed, Lucas's behavior didn't just stop at my sister. He started making subtle digs at those around him, including me. At family gatherings, I became a target for his humor. Because I'm single, he would say things like, "At least you won't have to worry about being judged for dessert choices," while the rest of the family laughed along. My parents would join in, playfully telling me, "Just wait until it's your turn," I tried to gloss over it and remained polite, but underneath, it was eating away at me. Things got worse when my sister got engaged. She called me up in tears, excited to announce the engagement, but all I could think about were the months of emotional turmoil. I tried to focus on her happiness, but inside, all I felt was dread. The wedding was set for a year later, and with each passing month leading up to it, I became more aware of how toxic Lucas was. I finally hit my breaking point at a family dinner when Lucas made a comment about my career. He called my job as a social media manager fake work and insinuated that I was using it as an excuse to be single. I felt my cheeks flush with anger. I snapped back, "Just because you can't understand it doesn't mean I don't work hard." The atmosphere became tense, and my sister glared at me, almost pleading for me to apologize. But I couldn't bring myself to back down. A week later, my sister called me to discuss my behavior. Her voice was trembling with anger. She told me how embarrassed she was by my outburst, and that Lucas thought I was an ungrateful brat who couldn't handle a little teasing. I felt crushed. How could she side with him after everything I'd seen him do? This was supposed to be my sister. We didn't talk for a month, and each time the family conversed, they subtly reminded me how much Lucas had changed my sister for the better. At that point, I realized that she might have some sort of blind spot when it came to him. I felt isolated. When the wedding date arrived, I felt a sense of dread rather than excitement. To be honest, I wasn't even sure I could stand watching her marry someone who treated her like that. I spent nights tossing and turning, going back and forth, fighting with myself about whether to go or not. On one hand, I wanted to be there for my sister. On the other, attending would mean subjecting myself to the very person who made me feel small. Eventually, the day came when I had to make a decision. I sent her a long text. "Hey," sister's name, "I just want to be honest with you. I care about you and I want you to be happy, but I can't be at the wedding with Lucas there. I feel like he disrespects me and that you deserve so much more. I don't want to ruin your day, but I also can't pretend that I'm okay with this." I hit send, and my heart sank. Within minutes, my phone buzzed. She called. "Are you seriously not coming?" She sounded bewildered. "I can't, sister's name, I can't pretend like this is okay. You have no idea how much this hurts me. I thought you were supportive. Why can't you just put your feelings aside for one day? It's my wedding. I can't celebrate something I fundamentally disagree with." "Well, if you feel that way, maybe you don't really care about me." The words stung harder than I expected. "That's not true. I love you, but I also love myself enough not to accept anyone treating me or my loved ones poorly. Then maybe I don't want you there." The call ended abruptly, and I sighed heavily, staring at the screen, my heart racing. I felt a sense of relief washed in with a sea of guilt. Could this really be the end of our relationship? On the day of her wedding, I chose to stay home. I put on a movie and tried to distract myself from the reality. The notifications on my phone kept buzzing. Friends and relatives sent me pictures from the wedding, her in her stunning dress, the couple smiling, the table settings that looked like they were straight out of a Pinterest board. I felt sick. For a while, I tried to convince myself that I had made the right choice, but happiness quickly turned into remorse. I couldn't escape the notion that while Lucas might be an awful fit for my sister, I still loved her, and this would forever change our relationship. When she finally reached out a week later, it was to say she needed some space. Space. It felt like a punishing sentence rather than a healing promise. It hurt far more than any snide comment from Lucas could, and yet I understood. She was in love with him, and that bond, while painful, was stronger than her bond with me. As weeks went by, I tried to touch base occasionally. I kept my messages light, asking how she was, how the honeymoon went. I'd often get back lukewarm replies, short sentences that confirmed she was moving on, perhaps even without me. It hit a climax when she invited me out for coffee one Saturday morning. I came prepared, having rehearsed my apologies and how I could make things right between us. I wore my best dress and practiced my lines with a friend beforehand, hoping this was a moment of redemption rather than finality. But when I arrived, she didn't seem thrilled. The cafe was bustling, filled with chatter and laughter, but her silence thickened the air between us. "I know you've moved on," I began, searching her face for signs of affection. "But I just want you to know I love you. I didn't mean to hurt you. Look, I just don't understand how you could do that. How could you not support me on the biggest day of my life?" Her voice quavered, her eyes searching mine, looking for answers. "I was trying to protect you. It was painful to see you with someone who disrespects you. I didn't ask you to protect me from my fiancé. This is my life, not yours." She inhaled sharply, almost choking on her determination not to cry. "I never asked you to love him just because I do, but you could have tried harder to accept it." The conversation drifted awkwardly. Everything I had rehearsed fell apart, and the two of us stood on the brink of losing everything we had built together, reduced to the embers of past laughter. As she turned away, walking out of the cafe, I felt it all snapping in two, the bond between us irreparably torn. In that moment, I knew I had made my stand, a moral high ground that came at a traumatic cost. Now, sitting here and writing this, I feel lost. It's been months since that day. The wedding was beautiful, and I saw pictures just like everyone else, but each day I wondered if I was right or wrong for standing my ground. Was it worth losing my sister, or was that the inevitable end of our story? So, Reddit, AITA. AITA for not supporting my sister's new husband. I'm writing this because, to be honest, I'm feeling a whirlwind of emotions over a situation that has me questioning my own morality, and I could really use an outsider's perspective. I'll try to give you all the details without too much backstory droning on. Just know this is a complicated situation that's left me frustrated, hurt, and convinced that I might be the bad guy in this scenario. I guess I should start with a bit of family history to set the stage. I'm 29 and my sister Sarah is 26. Growing up, we shared everything: clothes, dreams, laughter, and yes, sometimes tears. Sarah has always been the more adventurous one. She's that person who jumps into things head first, a free spirit in every sense of the term. Then there's me, responsible, safe, and a tad bit boring, if I'm being honest. I've always been the steady anchor in our little sisterly ship, while Sarah soared above the clouds, chasing after dreams more eccentric than mine. Last year, Sarah met Jacob, a guy who seemed like an odd fit for her just by looking at him. He's a self-proclaimed life coach, but hasn't got any certifications, and his past is dotted with periods of unemployment and soul-searching travels. He loves to talk about energy crystals and manifestation techniques, and while I try to respect everyone's path, I couldn't help but feel skeptical. I didn't think he was good enough for her, but with the whole love is blind thing, I kept my mouth shut. Fast forward to a few months ago. They decide to get married on a whim. Just like that, after getting to know each other for only 8 months, Sarah announced she'd be tying the knot in an intimate ceremony. No family or friends, just them and a minister in the woods. I was taken aback by how quickly everything happened. I remember her excitement, how she glowed when she spoke about Jacob, and how easily those visions of her future unraveled into me standing up at her wedding, albeit a surprise and uninvited one. Initially, I masked my apprehension with silence. I chalked it up to sister solidarity and a hope that maybe I was just being overprotective. But the more I thought about Jacob, the more I felt an overwhelming sense of dread. Then came the moment that changed everything. I stumbled upon a social media post. Jacob shared a photo of him and Sarah with a caption about how they manifested their deep connection and a perfect life together. In the comments section, his friends praised him for reeling in a great catch, with remarks about women who want to grow old in comfort being too conventional and afraid of true freedom. It rubbed me the wrong way. The day of the wedding, I wrestled with my conscience. I debated whether to crash the small ceremony, convinced that Sarah needed someone there who truly cared about her, instead of some guy who wasn't even a traditional fit for her. That morning, I took a deep breath, put on a decent outfit, and set out. My heart raced as I pulled up to the clearing in the woods where the ceremony was set to take place. As I arrived, my fear morphed into a fierce, protective instinct. I pushed through the branches and stumbled onto the scene where the minister stood with a bemused expression, clearly confused by my interruption. Sarah looked radiant in a flowing white dress, and Jacob, oh God, he fit right into his role as spiritual partner, all roguishly charming and overly self-assured. "Sarah!" I shouted, startling everyone. "You can't seriously be doing this." Silence fell over the clearing. Jacob turned, eyebrows knitted together in disbelief. "Excuse me?" he said, arms crossed over his chest. "Am I dreaming?" I threw my hands into the air. "You don't even know him well enough to marry him. Sarah, think about this." As the shock in the air settled, Sarah's expression morphed from surprise to anger. "What are you doing here? You didn't even want to meet him." My voice faltered, but I stood my ground. "I didn't because I didn't want to encourage this madness. You're rushing into something important, and you need a second opinion." "This isn't right." "You're being dramatic," she said coldly, her eyes narrowing. "You're just jealous because you settled down while I'm living my truth. Maybe you've become too conservative for your own good." My stomach dropped at that, and for a moment I was thrown off balance. "It's not that at all. Can't you see he's just using you?" That did it. Sarah's entire demeanor hardened. "Who do you think you are? This isn't about you." And before I could respond, she turned back to Jacob, vulnerability melding into anger as she took his hand. "Let's just do this," she said, and they exchanged vows under the arch of trees, ignoring me completely. I felt like a shadow standing side stage to an unfolding tragedy. After they signed their wedding certificate, I stormed off, leaving the chaos behind and seeking the comfort of my car. As I sat behind the wheel, tears fell freely down my cheeks. I hadn't meant to ruin her day, but all I could think was my sister was making the biggest mistake of her life. Fast forward to 2 months later. The drama didn't end there. It erupted in layers. In the aftermath of the wedding, Sarah and I barely spoke. I mean, she refused to acknowledge me. Her text replies were fragments of cold, dismissive texts. I felt like the villain in my own story, and it gnawed at my insides. Then I got a call from our mother. "Your sister is upset," Mom said, her voice wavering. "She's upset?" "Most people get upset when they're being blindsided by a wedding invite they didn't receive." I snapped. "Don't be like that," Mom replied. "Come on, she loves you." "She just needs some time." I sighed. Maybe I was overstepping. That thought loomed large despite feeling utterly justified. I decided to pay her a visit, thinking of how much I might have hurt Sarah with my sudden interruption. Showing up on her doorstep felt daunting. Would I be welcomed or would I be shunned? As I rang the doorbell, my heart thudded painfully against my ribs. When Sarah opened it, her face went through a rapid expression metamorphosis from shock to anger, and then maybe just a hint of sadness. "What do you want?" she said, folding her arms defensively. "I need to talk to you," I said, keeping my voice steady. "Can we just sit down for a minute?" She hesitated, but finally led me to the living room. It was filled with crystals and an odd assortment of handmade artwork, pieces that had Sarah's essence all over them. I realized then that I hadn't taken the time to absorb who she had become. "I'm sorry for interrupting your wedding," I started. "I just couldn't fathom seeing you with him, and well, I really didn't believe he was right for you." She rolled her eyes, clearly still upset with me. "I'm happy, and that should matter. Why can't you just support me in my choices?" "I see my sister thriving in all the wrong directions," I blurted. "You're changing, and I'm worried you're not thinking this through. This isn't about me being conservative. It's about me caring." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears. "You think I don't know who I'm with? I love Jacob. Stop projecting your fears onto me." I fell silent, realizing how much her perspective had shifted since we were younger. Hadn't I been a constant presence in her life, encouraging her flights of fancy? Now it felt like I did the very opposite. "Maybe all of this just scared me," I confessed. "We're growing up, and it's hard to see you choose someone so unconventional over what I thought you really wanted. I guess I worried I'd lose you to some flight of fancy." She relaxed just a little at that, a soft inclination towards understanding. "You're not losing me, but I would appreciate your support in decisions I make. I want to create my path, even if it doesn't fit what you think it should look like." I could barely breathe as I processed her words. "I'll try," I murmured, "but I just want what's best for you." "Even if what's best for me isn't the same as what you want." "Exactly," I admitted, my heart heavy with guilt yet swelling with hope. "I'll do my best to support you." In that room filled with colors and creativity, we shared stories, laughter, and tears. Sarah spoke of her future ambitions with Jacob, how she conspired plans of travel, freedom, and adventure. I didn't fully understand it, but that didn't mean that supporting her wasn't important. By the end of our lengthy conversation, I felt the fissures of our relationship begin to mend, fragile but earnest. I walked away from her house, little lighter, the cloud of dread hovering above me lift, knowing we could still meet on common ground. A few weeks later, I managed to attend her housewarming party, a colorful gathering filled with eclectic people. I brought her a simple gift, a journal, empty pages waiting for future dreams to be penned down. I caught Jacob for a moment, and for the first time, I saw what Sarah saw. He was earnest in wanting to uplift her, a gentle guiding force she could lean on. So yes, I can't say I wholeheartedly embraced this new venture just yet, but I found peace in being able to show up, ready to learn how to loving support my sister as she chased her quirky dreams and perhaps discover new dimensions of our relationship. As for this whole messy situation, I'm still wrestling with the title of the villain or the hero. Maybe I'll always be a little of both, but I've grown to realize there's a beauty in supporting someone's journey, even if it doesn't fully resemble what I had in mind. After all, I'm her sister, learning to embrace her life while managing to hold on to my own path too. So Reddit, AITA for my initial reaction to my sister's wedding? Am I merely protective, or did I overstep and lose sight of what truly matters, which is her happiness? Could I have handled it better? Had for refusing to attend my sister's wedding after she kicked me out, I 28M me. I'm in a pretty difficult situation right now with my family, especially my sister, 30F. I've been deliberating whether I'm the asshole in this scenario or if I'm justified in my feelings. Here's the background. My sister is everything I'm not. She's assertive, confident, successful, and seemingly has perfect relationships. I've always admired her for it, but deep down I've also struggled with feelings of inadequacy compared to her. I spent most of my 20s finding my path, which was a winding road of different jobs, passions, and a few failed relationships. I won't lie, this created a rift between us over the years. Last month she called me over for dinner with her fiancé. I was thrilled. It felt like a step toward mending our relationship. However, things quickly unraveled, as during many of our family gatherings the conversation veered toward her wedding plans. They were lavish, extravagant, and she couldn't stop talking about them. It was clear that she had a vision and the budget to execute it. I patiently listened, but with each word I felt the air getting heavier. The questions started, and soon I couldn't hold back my feelings any longer. Aren't you worried about how much you're spending? I mean, aren't weddings supposed to be meaningful, not just a show of wealth? It shouldn't have escalated, but it did. My sister's eyes flashed with annoyance. People spend money on what they care about, and we care about having a beautiful wedding. If you can't be happy for me, then maybe you shouldn't even come. The atmosphere shifted immediately. What was once an excited discussion about wedding colors and floral arrangements turned into awkward silence, broken only by the tension rising in the room. Her fiancé awkwardly tried to mediate, but everything I said seemed to dig a deeper hole. In a moment of anger and hurt, my sister kicked me out of her house. If you're just going to bring negativity to my wedding plans, I don't want you there. Just forget you're invited. I left, stunned and defeated. That weekend, I contemplated her words. Was I really that negative? Did I ruin her excitement? But every time I replayed our conversation, I felt betrayed as well. I hadn't meant to hurt her. I was trying to express my genuine concern about the pressures that came with her wedding. A week later, she texted me, essentially asking if I was going to grow up and apologize. I didn't respond for a few days. I wanted to make it clear that I wouldn't bend to avoid her anger and manipulation. Finally, I told her I wouldn't be attending the wedding if I couldn't be honest with her. Now here's the kicker. She told my family what happened, and they all sided with her. I'm getting calls from relatives who think I'm being selfish, even cruel, and it's putting more strain on our family dynamic. I'm caught in the middle, feeling isolated and alone. AITA. for refusing to go to her wedding after she kicked me out of her house. The story continues. The aftermath of the argument with my sister felt like the fallout from a nuclear explosion. Everything was scorched, and I was left standing in the ashes. I didn't think I'd get to the point of not attending my sister's wedding, but the further I ventured into this predicament, the more it seemed like the only option. The phones didn't stop buzzing. Text from my mom, messages from long-lost cousins, and even my dad's attempts at diplomacy. It was exhausting. Since that dinner, I'd taken time off work just to process everything. At first, I justified it as a personal day, but then I realized I was trying to avoid the inevitable storm that awaited me within my family. It wasn't just about the wedding anymore. It was about feeling manipulated, alienated. That night was a catalyst. It unveiled the fraying bonds I hadn't yet noticed. My phone pinged, and I found a group chat with my parents and sister buzzing with messages about how disappointed they were in me. It felt like I was the villain in their carefully crafted narrative. "Just admit you're jealous," my sister's messages read. "You need to grow up, and I didn't want to cancel Christmas over my wedding," she added sarcastically. I stared at my screen, mildly amused that she thought I would apologize just to salvage Christmas. Days turned into weeks, and soon her wedding day rolled around. Photos filled my social media feeds, pictures of the venue, and bridal party laughter, adorned with likes and comments. It felt like a bizarre form of public shaming. Each snapshot stung little reminders of my exclusion, and it wasn't easy to watch her treat me like I was a distant memory, like I was just an ant she casually stomped on because it was in her way. Finally, the day arrived. The morning light was dim, and I couldn't shake off the sense of impending doom. I tried to distract myself, going to the gym, rewatching my favorite shows, focusing on work, anything to orient myself around a semblance of a normal life. But when I clocked out for the day, I found myself sitting on my couch and staring at the wall. How could my family members celebrate such a monumental occasion without me? I was filled with resentment. It was a stupid wedding, a day built on romantic ideals and overpriced sentiments. But that's when the reality of my situation hit me. As I sat there in silence, I received a call from Mom. "Are you going to answer this ongoing mess?" She was clearly stressed but remaining somewhat cordial. You know it's not too late to apologize. A part of me wanted to scream at her. I don't see why I should have to apologize when she was the one who kicked me out. Instead, I just muted her lecture, my heart racing. I realized this was more than just my sister's wedding. It was about my worth in my family's eyes. Finally, I found myself strolling down a nearby park's path, soaked in the late afternoon sun. My phone buzzed again. "You're choosing to abandon your sister during one of the most important days of her life," another relative messaged, the echo of my sister reverberating in their tones. In frustration and despair, I turned off my phone and made my way to the pond. The swans glided gracefully across the water, and I struggled to find peace. Some part of me wanted to regret my stance, while another craved validation that I was, in fact, justified in my feelings. The evening rolled around and it struck me. I was left with two choices: continue living in resentment or choose a moment away from everything to heal. I returned to my apartment, riding the bus as I watched the world blur past. That night alone, I deliberated over the text that could resolve everything or plunge it deeper into chaos. Instead, I opened Instagram and scrolled through my sister's wedding photos. My heart sank further because she looked radiant, and even amidst her smile, I could still see the disconnect between us. I never did text back. Strangely enough, my long night had come to an end, but in the morning light I felt an unexpected weight lift off my shoulders as I embraced acceptance. My sister may have had her wedding, her life so perfectly curated, but I was on my path, unfolding, in its own imperfect way. I decided then, with a sense of clarity and focus, to put my life first. I resolved to stop waiting for my family's validation and start my own healing journey, independent of expectations thrust upon me. Weeks came and went. I was caught up in routine and found solace in work and new hobbies. I started making new friends, and honestly, it felt liberating not to be tangled in the family web of drama. Eventually, my sister reached out to me. "Let's talk," was all she said. I stared at the message for a long moment, contemplating what I'd say. I wasn't ready to jump back into everything, but I could make room for honesty. I responded cordially, but established my boundaries clearly. Her reply surprised me. "I'm sorry. I was so wrapped up in everything that I wasn't fair to you." Right. There I felt a glimmer of hope. While our relationship was still in shambles, it was a life raft in a heavy sea. We met weeks later to talk, and the discussion wasn't easy, but it felt refreshing. Although the conflict hadn't consumed me, a more profound understanding blossomed out of it. We were invited to betray each other's trust over something as trivial as a wedding, but what we found was a mutual need for communication and respect that had been forgotten along the way. I might have won the battle against my guilt and familial expectations, but the war with resentment was still an ongoing journey. I don't know if I'll ever attend another wedding with her, but I found a peace in standing my ground that had eluded me for so long. Sometimes being the asshole comes with lessons, and if I was an asshole in my sister's eyes, that was a label I was finally willing to wear. For my story wasn't just about a wedding, it was a journey. One that ultimately taught me to reclaim my life. AITA, no, I think I finally found my answer.